Anna is our Residency 1 playwright here at Signature this year, which means she's in residence with us for about a year or so, and we will produce 3 of her plays during that time, both earlier and new work. And we will start this season with 2 of her seminal works from the 1990s, Fires in the Mirror, which is just starting performances down the hall in the Linney Theater, and Twilight Los Angeles 1992, which will be in the Diamond Stage across the lobby there later in the spring. We're thrilled to have her here with us. As I'm sure all of you know, Anna is both a playwright and an actor and has pioneered a form of theater that she creates and performs based on interviews she conducts with real people, and then she portrays all of those people on stage herself. However, this season at Signature, she is stepping off the stage and acting as Playwright-in-Residence and very much engaged in our productions, but we will have other actors performing in the plays. We currently have the wonderful Michael Benjamin Washington in Fires in the Mirror just down the hall with Saheem directing. And so we're thrilled to have both of them here to talk about Fires in the Mirror tonight. So I'll kick off our discussion with a couple of questions for Anna and Saheem, and then we'll open it up to you to ask questions. So Anna, we'll start with you. When and why did you start creating Fires in the Mirror?
George Wolf was doing a festival at the Public Theater, and he invited me to do something, and I was living in San Francisco at the time, and it turned out it was going to be at Harvard that year, so I was here on the East Coast, and I remember George meeting me in San Francisco and asking me, well, what do you think you'll do? I said, well, I don't know, maybe chase ambulances. And the Public Theater gave me, I think, like 2 train tickets and maybe a couple nights in a hotel. So it wasn't like I could dawdle around trying to figure out what to do. And I knew about the riot, but it wasn't like huge news. There was also at the time struggle around Korean grocery stores that had popped up on every corner. That's not so much the case anymore. And so I was just kind of sniffing around. And then I went out to Crown Heights, and I was really taken with that story. And then I was very lucky to quickly, for example, get an interview with Al Sharpton. I don't know how I managed to do that. It was a 15-minute interview. I've teased him, but he ended up in the show twice, although it was a 15-minute interview. And I was just found all of the people that I met, Lubavitch, as well as a lot of the people were Caribbean American, not just African American. And I found it very engaging, and I wrote a play that actually was for George. The performance actually was not exactly focused on Crown Heights, but 2 things happened. One, Joanne Akalitis, who was the head of the Public Theater at the time, came backstage. I had 2 performances, and of this other, I can't remember the name of it, but it was broader, and then there was just some of Crown Heights in it. And she came backstage and said the story is that Brooklyn story. And I also got a phone call from Antizaki Shange, and that was just a big deal for me to have on my message machine. It's still when we had message machines, that Antizaki had called me, and she was like, oh yeah, what did I call? Oh yeah, that Bensonhurst play was really good. And so then I knew that really trusting 2 exquisite theater artists that the story was really the Crown Heights story. And you know, Joanne had said she was going to do it as a production, then she changed her mind. Some things went down that had nothing to do with me, and I was working with Paula Vogel, teaching some of her classes at Brown, because she had a production here in New York, and I said, oh, Joanne's not going to do it. We were up in the freezing cold at Brown, and she said, you get on that train, and you go down there to New York, and you tell Joanne Akalitis she has to produce your play. I said, oh, I can't. And she said, get on the train. And so I've always credited Paula Vogel for giving me courage.
Great, thank you. This was in 1991?
Yes, that's right.
And you said you weren't sure how you got Al Sharpton, but how did you find and connect with
You know,
your other
it's,
subjects?
I don't know, I was thinking about that. I sort of had Stanford University stationery, and I had Harvard University stationery, but I had sense enough to know that would be like the worst thing to send to some people. And you know, it's just one of those things where you meet people, some people will talk to you, and those people will say, well, you got to talk to Sonny Carson, or you have to meet Roz Malamud. And so, you know, in all of my work, it's about just find two people, and those two people will lead you to people, and then you'll meet everybody that you need to meet.
And how long did it take you to conduct the interviews?
Well, I did some, you know, in those 2 train rides that I had, and then I came back, and I didn't spend that long, really. And I had 50 interviews, which is very unusual now. Notes from the Field, I had 250. For Twilight, I had 320. For my play House Arrest, I had over 500 interviews. I usually have a lot of material. So, you know, all said, I guess Fires in the Mirror was pretty tame. You know, how many characters are there?
26.
26, so half of them made it into the show.
And Saheem, what was your first exposure to Anna's work?
So I grew up in Kenya, born and raised in East Africa, and so I hadn't been exposed to the theater as a theater goer or reading the theater. So coming to America, I took a theater history class, so it was kind of like a crash course for me. And this one class tried to like encompass all of theater history in a really kind of compressed way. So it was the Greeks, and then Chekhov, Ibsen, Shakespeare, and then in America it was Tennessee Williams, Arthur Miller, and Anna Deavere Smith. So
You never told me that.
yeah, and it was at the very end because it was like very contemporary, and so this whole notion of verbatim theater and interviewing individuals to create a piece of art, very contemporary, and we read Fires in the Mirror, and I was just completely blown away by it. So I had put it away for a few years, and then Paige Evans, who's the artistic director here, set up the interview with me and Anna, and so I picked it up again to prepare for the interview, and I was just completely blown away because, you know, I work mostly with new plays and new playwrights, so I'm very used to reading a script for the first time and thinking, okay, the playwright's going to want to hear from me what my thoughts are, what my perspective is, and what feedback I can offer. So that part of my brain is always switched on when I'm reading a play. So to read Fires in the Mirror, where it's a perfect piece of theater, and I could just completely turn off that part of my brain and just like be swept away by these characters and this event and this drama, it really knocked my socks off. So it was a 20-year span from reading it for class and then reading it to prepare to meet with Anna.
And what was it like being interviewed by such an accomplished interviewer?
I had to very purposefully forget that. I said, I'm going to meet a human being who is an artist, and we're going to connect as human beings, and she's going to want to know something about me, and I'm going to want to bring the best part of myself forward. So I came in with my best foot forward, and you know, there's no way to prepare for this play because there are so many characters, there's just so much history. It's impossible to come in with like every single character memorized and studied and considered. And so I came in to meet Anna, and I just wanted her to meet me as a human being, meet me as an artist, and express how important she had been and how important this work was and what I could bring to it. So I tried to just kind of like not be too intimidated by her and just have a conversation.
So how did the two of you approach this production and this moment together? What were you thinking about looking at the play again and looking to direct it?
Well, you know, I thought that I should try to step back in the beginning. It was really powerful to hear it in auditions, I would say. That's really the first acquaintance with it after all these years. None of my students, and some of them are here right now, none of my students ever bring my work to class, so I don't know what that's about, y'all, but guess I just don't rate, huh? But anyway.
It was incredible hearing Anna respond, laugh out loud at some of these monologues as if she was hearing it for the first time.
Well, yeah, so I think really for me, the audition process was an incredible opportunity to, and he was like, I was like, man, I don't want to have to audition for Saheem, because he'd make people come in with half the play, and or go home and come back with 2 more monologues. I was like, oh my God. So I did get to hear a lot of the play for the first time, because I don't watch the movie. I think I saw the movie one time when PBS gave a party to show it. So I really have been distant from the work in that way.
Saheem, what about you in terms of design, or what was important to you to emphasize or just to consider with this production now?
Yeah, I wanted to approach it from a clean slate, so I didn't watch the movie either. I didn't see the original production, so I really looked at it as a script that I was tackling for the first time. So I wanted to find my entry into it, what themes resonated for me, how I could create a container for the actor. Because the thing about this play, more than any other play that I've worked on, is it really depends on who is up there. It's very challenging to create in isolation, and so with Anna, she was always present as the writer and as the performer, so anything that was part of the construction of the event involved her. So for me to think of this play without the actor was very, very challenging. So I had to have a conceit for it. I wanted to create a container that would allow an actor to tell the story, but then I knew that it could never be complete until the actor was cast. And Anna was very open and generous in being, in accepting like anyone to come in for the role. So I had thought it had to be a black woman to play this part first. But then when we had conversations and Anna was open to a man playing it, I thought, oh wow, okay, so that completely reorients how I'm thinking about it. So not until Michael Benjamin in Washington was cast did we actually finish the design of it. I knew I wanted to be abstract and open and nuanced and subtle and theatrical, but different actors would require different components to create these characters. And so I couldn't decide for Michael what he needed to be Ntozake Shangi, what he needed to be George Wolfe. So that part had to be a true collaboration. So we created some components and I left enough open for him to be able to contribute and collaborate.
In terms of the casting, what did you discover in terms of who might be the right person to portray all of these people that you knew, but this person would not have met them as you did? Did you discover, were you surprised?
Well, I thought that it would be very interesting to cast a man in the role, because when you think about it, the story revolves around 2 men. One boy and a man, and then many men who had a lot to say, and in fact, one of the things when I was sort of going around New York sniffing to see, as I read press about the story in Crown Heights, what was interesting to me is the boy, Gavin Cato, started to disappear. And it was really mostly about these people who were either activists or politicians who really were taking up all the space. And that was sort of stunning to me. But I felt that, it would be very interesting to see how a male body would take on this story of a tragedy of a boy and a man, Yankel Rosenbaum, and then the people around them. And men who tended, I think, at least then, to think of themselves as the guards of their communities at large, the guards of their communities at large. And also, I may have been going in that direction. Did any of you all see Notes from the Field, my last play? So you notice in Notes from the Field, I had a black man on stage with me. And it's the first time I've done that. I've worked with a cellist and a violinist on 2 other things that were more abstract. But I felt, even with Notes from the Field, that it was important to actually have a male body to mark much of the crisis that was also being explored in Notes from the Field. So I was sort of headed in that direction anyway.
Saheem, did you want to add anything about the casting?
About the casting, yeah, it was, like Anna said, I did give a lot of material to the actor because I knew they'd have a lot of material to deal with. So part of the test was, if you have 3 monologues, how are you going to approach them? Are you going to be able to memorize them quickly? Are you going to have enough distinction? Because it's a very specific kind of actor who can handle this material. You have to be chameleonic, you have to be dynamic, you have to be really versatile. And so it's partly handling the different material, but also partly what kind of tools do they have, what kind of training do they have, how open are they, how nimble on their feet are they, because with a 3.5-week process, it's not a lot of time to create 26 individual silhouettes and fully fleshed human beings. So we're looking for someone who could be really nimble and dynamic, and Michael Benjamin Washington has been really extraordinary. I hope everyone here is going to get to see him because he is fascinating.
I'm sure they will. But you know, I also have to say that I was very moved by all of the actors who came in and how much they were willing to do that kind of preparation and take leaps. I was very moved and very, very interested in each one of them, and it wasn't anybody who didn't interest me a great deal.
You know what I will say about that, Anna? It's the material. The material does that.
No, I mean, I think it's the people too. I mean, I think I just was very moved at how much they were willing to throw themselves in, come back with 2 more monologues, or go outside and try Angela Davis for the first time, stuff like that.
Do we have questions out here? And I will repeat the question. Yes, sir, in the plaid shirt.
I'd like to ask Anna, when you're doing the interviews, are you fully transparent? You tell your interviewees exactly what this is about, their words will appear in your play and so on?
The question was, is Anna transparent about why she's interviewing the people that she interviewed?
Well, yeah, I don't know if I don't do quite the same thing now. I think now, because I have a bigger team and all of that, when I wrote Fires in the Mirror, it was just me going around these neighborhoods, rather scary, with my only important possession of my whole life, which was a Sony tape recorder that was about that big, you know, terrified something would happen to that. But I would start every interview by saying, you know, whatever about the project, and then I would always say, I'm going to take something of this interview and repeat it on stage. Is that okay with you? May I use your name? Because I like to credit the people who've talked, yes or no. If you say something and you don't want me to repeat it, make that clear on tape and I won't repeat it. So I always gave, and then I had a release form that also allowed people to see what was going to happen.
Other questions? Yes, over at the bar.
I saw the show, and I was so moved by the, seeing the Jews being interviewed and the African-Americans, and feeling the strengths and vulnerabilities of both sides. And what Anna said about, forgive me, I'm getting old, about, hard and fast views, having absolutism in one approach, justice, around change. And I was so moved by as I say, the strength and vulnerabilities portrayed in the script by that amazing actor, Mr. Washington. I for him to play all those different roles. And brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And I want to say thank you for broadening my view. Thank you.
So if you couldn't hear, it wasn't a question, but a thank you and gratitude for presenting both sides of this story. Yes, right here. Question is for Saheem, being from outside of the United States, what broader themes in the play resonate for him?
Yeah, so I'm from a place where we have tribalism, we don't have racism as much, so I learned racism when I came to this country. I learned that I'm a person of color and I'm not white by coming to America. So it's been a real, and I'm an American citizen now, so I am now, as someone who's part of this country, I am inside of it and outside of this construct. The divisions in the play to me were really fascinating because I found Crown Heights at this time to be a real microcosm of this country, of struggles, of the divisions, of the challenges of people of different identities living side by side. I think right now we're living in a moment where the political has become really, really apparent, like who's on what side of the spectrum, and we have to deal with that. Our fellow citizens have completely different ideas as we do about what's right and what's wrong. And so I think that one of the things that theater can do so beautifully is to present something really specific and really concrete, and then allow you to take that and reflect on it in your own life and see how are you complicit, how are you also responsible for the divisions that exist, and what can you do to change. So reading the play for me, it really broadened my experience of like what I'm exposed to in terms of American stories, and I was able to see like really the humanity of these people who, as the lady said, like there's so much vulnerability expressed on that stage. There's so much pride and confusion and hurt that you can understand on both sides of the spectrum. So it really reminds us to be compassionate and expansive about how we view the world and what we can do to make a difference.
Thank you. Yes, here in the front row.
Well, I've been an admirer since your very first work. I know you're from Baltimore, and I was from Baltimore and couldn't get a ticket up here, but you did come to Baltimore and do it. But what I want to say regarding what you said, don't you think it's time you were to start another piece showing the country as it is? I'd love to hear your work.
Well, the question is, should I start another piece showing the country as it is? You know, maybe, but I also think sometimes you have to step back and, as an artist, it's very powerfully confusing and divided. You know, yeah, if I had I'd love to, you know, what I'd love to do is what I was originally going to do with this whole way of working, which was, I started working like this in the late 70s. And the first play that I wrote this way was about New York. And I had 20 actors, and I walked up to people on the street basically and said, I know an actor who looks like you. If you'll give me an hour of your time, I'll invite you to see yourself performed. And I thought that what I would have is a troupe of actors who would go around America and show up in some town and tell the story of that town. Well, at that time, I thought I'd never be able to figure out how to raise money, and so I would just do it myself, because I remembered I was a mimic when I was a kid. But, I mean, it would be a wonderful project, wouldn't it? It wouldn't surprise me if somebody's not doing it now, is to, you know, or at least that it might be happening in colleges or high schools or community colleges where people are seeking to, you know, make very personal this division. And the last thing I'll say is, my big inspiration is my grandfather, who said, if you say a word often enough, it becomes you. And so I've been trying to become America word for word, and that's really true over, you know, starting in 1980 till now, and to really solve the problem of having grown up in a segregated city, Baltimore, and not feeling like I had any belongingness. And so part of the project has helped me understand this country. So I do wish I could just go out and do that, but you know, it's not really practical at the moment. But maybe somebody in this audience will have heard the idea and is going to go out and do it. And can you fund it if somebody?
I'm going to take a couple more questions. Yes, I see someone way over there. Yes.
When I also think about it, you know, thank you for all of your work and everything that you have given to all of us. And what I also think about, and what I share with other people, and especially just right now, if we could all look around just in this room alone, like we're always talking about our divisions. But I also look around and I see where we have common mouths and common interests. And sometimes when we talk about the ripple effect,
I just quickly want to say to you, Beth, that, you know, this particular gathering right here defies what people normally think that the theater is, which is middle-class Caucasian people over 50 years old. And if you look around here, this is a very diverse group of people in terms of age and everything else, and that's very encouraging to me because I believe in audience. I believe that you know, you know a lot more about race relations right now in the way that you live than I do, than Saheem does, and Michael Benjamin Washington does. So as a collective, you have a kind of ability that, you know, could be activated somehow, some way. You know, I believe in difference, I will say that. I don't think there's anything the matter with difference. I think that we have tagged to difference ideas about separation that are convenient for what, not for how we want to be. And, you know, I think our challenge as human beings is how to meet strangers with kindness rather than fear or other kinds of ways of shutting them out. But I'm very encouraged by this group, and I hope that you'll tell all of your friends that Fires in the Mirror and what Saheem and Michael are doing has spoken to you, and that we'll see audiences like this over and over again.
Thank you, Anna. We'll take one last question for someone who hasn't asked one. Yes, back in the center.
I'm wondering if you have the original tapes and, or like, you know, have your work, you imitate the person to a certain extent and how that translates.
Well, that's one of my students who's done a similar project, and she's very good at it. It's Jessica Harris, where they've had to perform each other in a much more complicated way than what I do. You know, I have not located the Fires in the Mirror tapes, unfortunately, but I also think that this is a great, I mean, I think they're in San Francisco. That's not good, I think they're in San Francisco. But I think that, you know, for me, it was very important actually to see if the text can stand on its own. In other words, that was one project, right? Me going out, meeting these people, using a technique that I had been developing for quite some time, and, you know, the sort of invite you to see yourself perform thing. But I do think that the work that Saheem and Michael have done shows that the work stands on its own, that these people are worthy of being what we would call dramatic characters just on the basis of, I think, the text that they wrote, the brilliant text that they wrote coming out of their mouths. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And what's interesting about even the way that the text is laid out is the text actually betrays a kind of DNA of these characters. You get a sense of how their internal logic works because of how Anne has mapped it out on the page. So it really is, it's a map. It's a beautiful map, and you're able to get a window into this person's soul just from the basis of how they're speaking, not only what they're saying, but how they're saying it. It's on the page. So the text absolutely stands by itself.
Thank you so much, Anna and Saheem, for talking to us today.
Thank you.